Hello and welcome to Pickleball Therapy, the podcast dedicated to your pickleball improvement, specifically your pickleball mind. My name is Tony Roy, the host of this weekly podcast. It's a pleasure to be with you. Hope you're having a great week. This week we have a three-parter. The first part, we're going to talk about our sisters in pickleball first. I think it's a really important subject, and I think if you listen to this podcast, you're part of the pickleball therapy community. You're in a group of pickleball players that can actually do something with this information. So we're going to explore that. Then I'm going to have a riff in this week's podcast. I need to have some therapy with you here. And then at the end, I'm going to answer Carol's question. Speaking of Carol's question, I may owe you guys an apology because I didn't realize that Spotify had that many comments in there. I frankly didn't even know we had comments in Spotify, but found that out this morning. So if you sent a comment in the last few years and I didn't respond to it, and it was something that was a question that needed a response, my apologies for that. But now they have that on the radar. So if you have questions in the future, you want to have a conversation about things inside the podcast, something that worked for you, didn't work for you, something that made sense or maybe didn't, put it in the comments in Spotify. Feel free to do that. And we will do our best to keep track of that and answer them as appropriate as I'm doing today. Before we dive into the podcast, appreciate everyone who's had a chance to pick up a copy of the book and check it out. If you haven't had a chance yet, you can find the book it's Pickleball Therapy, the book. Find it on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble or Walmart. And it's also included in your Kindle Unlimited. If you're a Kindle subscriber, I believe it's called that. It's the Kindle, I think it's Kindle Unlimited, the Kindle subscription service. You can read it. It's just included in that, or Kindle Select maybe, whatever it is. Just look for it in Kindle. If you find it in Kindle and you're subscribed to it, you'll be able to read it. We wanted to make sure you had access to the book, so we put it available in there. So, all right, let's tackle this first subject. It's going to be a heavy subject, but we're going to dive right into it, which is, how's your sister doing? And here I'm referring specifically to our pickleball sisters, our sisters in the sport that we love and play. And the reason this became front and center for me in terms of my thinking was because of the controversy that happened. I think it was a week and a half ago now when I'm recording this podcast, when the men's U.S. hockey team wins the gold. There's some locker room banter, or what's called locker room banter, that appears to suggest that, or diminish, if you will, the accomplishment of the women's hockey team, U.S. women's hockey team that had won gold 3 days before. And so that got me to thinking about this idea of locker room banter. Is it something that, is it harmful? Is it not harmful? There's a lot of backlash to it, and from women athletes, right? Both in hockey and outside of hockey, and just, folks in general. So it got me to thinking, right? I've never been a woman athlete, so I don't know personally what that's like, but I can use my brain and my thinking to process and to try and understand, what we may be doing with this idea of locker room banter. It also causes some self-reflection, right? And because I'm not going to tell you that I've never, been involved in that kind of conversation as a younger person, but now I'm a 56-year-old man. I'm a coach. So, I can think about it a little bit more fully. And you're going to see there's actually something that occurred. I also wrote an article about this that's going to be published, probably published in the kitchen. I don't control their publication, but I'm going to submit it to them for consideration for their publication. But in writing the piece, I realized something about the way that I was thinking about this subject. So I'll explain that as we go through that. And I want to be clear, this is not an article about condemning. It's not an article about, criticizing, backward criticizing. That's not the point of this. This is a forward-looking article where we're trying to explore a subject and then determine, is there something that we can do? And at the end, I'll give you some suggestions that we can do. I'm going to suggest to you that this conversation is for all players, right? Male player, female player, all players. This is a conversation that we all should be involved in. And again, if you listen to the Pickleball Therapy podcast, I'm confident that it's the kind of conversation that you'll be open to having. Whether you agree or disagree with me, I don't know, but you'll be open to having the conversation. All right, let's start with, let's look at this idea of locker room banter, or quote unquote, like harmless little humor, harmless comments. And let's explore, right? Is it really in fact harmless? I'm going to start from the premise that the banter itself is of no value, right? Basically, the banter, the very foundation of the banter is a diminution of somebody else, right? That's the premise of it. Otherwise, the comment is flat, right? The reason it lands is because there's this idea that that there is this relative difference between one group and another group. So it's basically, diminishing another person, right? So is that, and there's no reason to do that, right? There's no value in doing that. And I dive a little further, right? Which is, we all came from our mother, right? I mean, that's just the way that we're done. We're made, right? We're constructed. And so, our mother was the reason that we are here, fed us probably, clothed us, housed, took care of the housing. I mean, all those kinds of things, right? And I'm not saying that that's all the time, but for a lot of us, that was the reality. That was my reality. But yet, when we're out on a pickleball court and a woman comes out onto the court, I don't know that, I think it's not unusual for the players on the court, particularly male players on the court, to wonder, is this woman going to be good enough to hang with us on this court? Right. And we don't generally have the same exact kind of thought. If a male player comes on the court, average male player holding a paddle, walking normally, probably think, okay, they can handle themselves. A little bit different standard, right? When a woman player comes on the court, and the idea that I hope she can play, right? It's just, there's this difference that happens with a person who literally is the person that, if she had children, right? Not every woman's a mother, but these are our mothers, right? And so we're having this idea that because you're a female player, I'm going to ask a question that I wouldn't ask otherwise. So I would say there's really no reason to diminish somebody else. But even if it was just diminishing somebody else with nothing more, right? With nothing further, because we're going to go a little deeper on this, with nothing further, then maybe you would say, okay, not great. But I'm not a huge fan of it, but what's the big deal? There's no harm. So let's go ahead and explore harm now, right? But before we go to harm, I just want to make sure I wrap this first one up. I don't think I wrapped it up well enough for you. There's an initial question that you need to ask yourself, which is, should we diminish another person just for our chuckle, right? Even if there was no harm to them, right? Assuming no harm to anybody, should we do that? I'm going to submit the answer is likely no, right? There's other ways to engage in life that don't require that. But it gets worse, because you're going to see that there's actually two harms that we're going to explore. There's an internal harm to the utterer and the participant, and there's an external harm to the target of the comment. So let's dive into those now. So let's talk first about the internal harm to the utterer and to those that participate in that kind of conversation. And it's basically the internal harm is what I want to explore in terms of how I even develop, my thinking as I was writing the article. So as I'm writing the article, I write the following sentence. Many of the best players I have played with and against have been female players. Now, this is me writing the article on its first draft, trying to work through this subject. And so I write that sentence. Many of the best players I've played with and against have been female players. Now, to me, when I first wrote it, that seemed okay to write. That seemed like a fine statement to make. And maybe to you, when you hear it, you're like, what's wrong with that kind of statement, right? I mean, so I'm going to say it one more time. Many of the best players I've played with and against have been female players. Now, here's the problem with that, right? What's the next sentence, right? What's the next sentence that I'm going to say here? The next sentence has to be something like, therefore, female players should be able to play pickleball because I've played with good female players. You see, so there's this fallacy, right? That's built into the statement that I'm making, but it's a fallacy that's built in because of, I'm thinking I'm saying the right thing, but I shouldn't have to say that, right? I mean, a female player should be entitled to fully participate in pickleball, period. That's it. Not a female player should be entitled to participate in pickleball because I, Tony Roy, I can vouch for the fact that I've seen good female players. That's not a condition of playing this sport. So why does it seem that that statement needs to be made? And that's a kind of, pernicious kind of internal harm that can happen to the participants. You create this irrational illogical condition to female players participating in this sport, which shouldn't be there. So I'm going to submit to you that the statements, in addition to being not necessary because they're causing harm to somebody, they're diminishing somebody else, I should say, not harm. They're diminishing somebody else, period. That should be enough. They're causing internal harm to the utterers by creating this framework or this landscape where female players need to do more or show more. There needs to be some qualifier so that they can enjoy the sport. And that's not the only one, right? The other one is the one about the players come on the court, a female player comes on the court who you don't know, and you ask yourself, oh, I wonder if she can hang, right? I wonder if she can handle this, right? Because she's a woman, the same thing wouldn't be asked of an equivalent male version of that person. And that's something that is harmful to the utterer. Now let's get to the final harm, which is the external harm. That's the harm that's caused to the female players who are the quote unquote butts of the jokes, right? And here's the thing. It's not like female players don't know this is going on. It's not like they're oblivious to these conversations, right? And think about that for a second. I mean, what's that like? Where you're repeatedly reminded of, or not reminded, because it's not reminded would make it sound like it's a legitimate thing to be reminded of, where you're repeatedly told or repeatedly suggested that maybe, you're not as worthy or as good or as something than your male counterparts. It's got to be eroding, right? It's got to feel eroding. And I'll tell you that I would submit to you, based on my interactions as a coach, that what I've noticed is, generally speaking, these are very general statements, right? But I will say that female players generally underrate themselves or undervalue their performance, whereas male players, again, not all of them, but male players generally overvalue their performance. I've dealt with male players who swear to me that they're playing 4.0 or 4.5 pickleball even. They might be playing 3.0 to 3.2 pickleball, maybe 3.5 on a good day. And I've met female players, and I remember one specifically at a camp who this female player, she was an older woman, she was a baller, absolute baller, right? Probably 4.0 pickleball in her age bracket, and she considered herself a 3.0. And again, these aren't, I know that doesn't apply to everybody, but generally speaking, that's the experience that I've had. And when I've spoken to other coaches and other players, they express similar experiences. So, it'd be different like if that was my experience and I was sharing it and they were like, no, it never happens in my area. Happens. And so there is certainly some effect, right? Or I think you could reasonably argue that there is some effect from negative statement after negative statement or diminishing statement after diminishing statement and the perceived self-worth of individuals. So this, again, harmless, this, what we started with was a premise that there's a harmless locker room conversation, just locker room chat isn't so harmless, right? We have needless diminishment of other human beings. We have harm to the expressor or the folks around them in terms of how they view their interactions with female players. And then you have the negative impact on the female player. So I think that should be enough to suggest that this kind of banter, should be not be engaged in, and it should be discouraged. So let me give you what I believe are some things that we can do to perhaps reduce this and then maybe turn this around, so it doesn't happen as often or ever in the future. And I'll start first with the male player, and then I'll give you my suggestions for female players. I will give you a caveat there that, I know that I'm trying not to overstep my role because I've never been a female player, so I don't, I'm just offering my suggestions as a coach. So for the male players, I would say, avoid engaging in the locker room banter that needlessly diminishes your sister, right? And then next level is to call out any such talk in your circles. Just call it out and just say, it's not necessary or not appropriate, or you can explain to them if you want to go further, the harms of it. Welcome female players to join your court. Okay. Be the player who's like the champion, if you will, of the female player coming onto the court. In other words, welcome them. Don't just, accept them. That's fine. If you just accept them, that's okay. But why not champion them? Why not, call out to a female player? Hey, Susan. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Lisa. Come on, I got you. You're going to partner with me. We're going to kick some butt, stuff like that, right? Empower the groups. And listen, I wish it wasn't necessary, but I think it's maybe not necessary, but it's certainly helpful to have that in happening. And then, generally speaking, do what you can to be supportive and welcoming to female players in your community. Whether let's say you have like 2 different courts, advanced or a beginner, intermediate, or intermediate, advanced, and there's a player playing on beginner, female player on beginner who should be an intermediate. Maybe go up to her and say, "Hey, listen, why don't you come over to intermediate and play with me a couple of games? I think you can hang on this court." Do that kind of a thing, and we should be doing that anyway, right? Just general big picture, but this one we're focusing on our sisters, and I use that term both for men and women. Female pickleball players are our sisters, and male pickleball players are our brothers. So looking out for them. All right, let me talk to you as a female player now, and I offer this as a friend and coach. And I'm not thinking of mansplain here, and I'll open this up to you. But if anything I'm saying here is, incorrect, could be improved. If I'm mansplaining, send me an email, please. Let me know. Tony@betterpickleball.com. I don't pretend to have all the answers, and I'm open to getting better at stuff. So for female players, I would suggest to continue providing a welcoming environment to female players. I know that in my local pickleball community here, there are several women's groups who play together. I think it's super fantastic that they play together, that they support each other, that they're there for each other. I think that's really powerful, and I encourage that to continue and grow as much as possible. And again, this is a friendly, unsolicited advice as a coach and as a friend of yours. Be realistic of where you're on. Be realistic where you are in the game, but don't try and avoid going lower. Right? Just be objective with it. If you see a court and you're like, I can hang on that court, go play on that court. Don't be, hey, I can't play on that court because I'm not good enough. That happens too often. So just be objective about it. And then if this is helpful to you, allow me to be a reference for you in your corner. And I'm going to share a story now to tell you how that came about and what the offer is. So basically, this is a student of mine several years ago. We became, friendly and we communicate with each other about things outside of just, how you're doing with your shots, kind of keep me updated on what was going on with her and her progress and things like that. So she was traveling. I believe it was a work trip, but she was traveling, had her paddle with her, went to some courts. There was an open play going on, but male players were there, small open play, maybe 6 players or something like that, as I recall. She looked at the court and said, I can hang on this court. So she approached and asked whether she could join. The first question out of the players, one of the male players' mouths was, "What's your level?" She was honest about it and said 3.5. Now, from her perspective, these gentlemen were not more than 3.5, so she should have been fine playing on that court. She was not allowed to join the group because she said she was 3.5. I'm going to digress here real quick. This is a guess by me, but I'm guessing that if I had showed up to the court with my bag and my paddle and they'd asked me my level and I had said 3.5, I think they would have let me play. But beside the point, I mean, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, but that's not the point right now. The point right now is she was not allowed to play. So in talking to her, that was troubling to me. So I suggested to her a solution, maybe, or at least a stopgap, which is the next time she traveled, if the same thing occurred, right? She looked at the court, she saw that she could hang, and she was asked her level, that she should respond by saying she's a 4.5 level player. Let me be clear, 4.5 level player. Now, my guess is that if she was a good player, but she was not a 4.5 level player, not in the traditional sense of that term. So maybe she gets some pushback, right? At the end of the session or something like that. You tell me you're 4.5, you don't look 4.5, something, snarky comment like that. That's when, in addition to just offering the idea of the 4.5, saying you're 4.5, is you can tell. I told my friend, I said, feel free to tell them that that's not your rating for yourself, that's a rating that I gave you. And then you give them my name and you give them my email address, Tony@betterpickleball.com, if they have a question about my rating of you, that I gave you a 4.5 level rating and that's what you go by. And I extend the same offer to you. if you're listening to this podcast and you ever need to say your level in a situation where you can hang on the court, right? So I'm trusting your judgment. You make the call. I can play on this court, and you're asked your level. Feel free to say 4.5. And then once they question that, you can always refer them to me. Now, I want to be clear about this real quick. I'm not suggesting that we can get around facility rules and stuff like that, because every facility has their rules. So you can't just walk into a facility and say, I'm a 4.5. Tony Roy said so. That's a different story. What I'm talking about here is where you see a group of players at a park or something like that, and you see them and you say, I can do that. And they ask you as a condition to you joining them, what's your level? Then you can say 4.5. And then you can use me as your background, as your backup, if that will help you. So, and I'm going to wrap with this just from the article itself. Life provides each of us continuing opportunity for growth. I, for one, regret ever having been a part of or silent during locker room banter. My hope is that each of us can grow in this area, and doing so add to the growth of a healthier pickleball collective, including for our sisters. So I know that was a little bit deep and big, but I think it's an important subject. Anyway, so I wanted to bring that with you. And in fact, the riff relates to that some. I'm not going to dive into the details on the riff too much, other than tell you the way that I handled it and how I think I could have handled it better in the future. So I'm going to dive right into the riff. So the riff happened this week, playing some pickleball. The situation arose on court where I didn't like what was happening on the court. I felt like a good friend of mine that I played with for years behaved in a way that was not becoming of himself, frankly, and of our group. And he put me in a very awkward spot with another friend of mine who I had invited to play with us. And the situation, I was trying to figure out why I got pretty pissed. And, you listen to the podcast. I'm not saying I never have, I have a temper, but, I know how to navigate things better now and stuff like that. But I got very pissed during this game. And in fact, I told my friend at the end of the game that, we were going to have a conversation. We haven't had the conversation yet, but we're going to have a conversation about what occurred that day. What I want to share with you is what happened from my perspective, not from either my friend's perspective, but from my perspective. And I was trying to figure out why was I not able to unplug sooner from the event. And there's a couple of things I think that happened. One was the behavior didn't become, and I guess looking in hindsight, I don't think the behavior became bad until it became repetitive. Right. So it's not like the first time it happened, I could have gone, okay, let me pull the plug on this situation. It was when it repeated that it became bad. And then again, looking at it in hindsight, what I think I was feeling at that time were two things. One was I'm processing in real time, though delayed, I think, because I think I still could have short-circuited it a little bit. But I was processing it in real time. And then or it's delayed in processing in real time. I'm like seeing what's happening, but I'm not really connecting the dots, right? And there's a certain amount of incredulousness by me, like that this is happening, that my friend is doing this. And what he was doing was incorrect to my other friend, but it was also incorrect to me, right? And it was a betrayal of our friendship, because what he was doing was disrespectful to me as well. I'm not trying to diminish, the impact on my friend and the other situation, but I'm just speaking here on how I'm reacting to it, and how I'm feeling was compounded, right? There was a compounding of seeing something that was going on that was incorrect, and then also feeling myself being disrespected. So the way that I responded to it, which I wish I had done differently, was I started hitting out more fully. Frankly, if I'd gotten a short ball, I probably would have tried to tag my friend. That's what I was feeling. I was feeling this is effed up and I don't like what's happening right now. And I was getting upset about it. In hindsight, and with reflection now, what I should have done is stop the match. That's the easiest outcome, right? And that's what I would suggest you do, right? If you ever feel yourself that way, is you just pull the plug, or you just flip that switch where you're just like, I'm out. Walk up to the net, tap paddles, you can give any reason you want to, and get off the court. That's what I should have done in hindsight. And I'm hoping that if anything like this occurs again, that'll be my reaction sooner, right? Rather than waiting till the end of the match, getting all pissed off. get going a little nutty on the court, and then telling my friend, the friend who was acting inappropriately, we're going to have a conversation later, and then walking off the court. We did have paddles and everything like that, but, I wish I'd done it sooner. So, learning experience for me. Wanted to share with you because that's part of our bargain here at the podcast is, whenever something like this happens, I'd like to share it with you so that I can grow and you can grow along with me. All right, let me dive into Carol's question here. Carol is a pickleball system student. So we call it TPS. And the comment, if you see the comment on Spotify, it says TPS. That's the pickleball system, which is our program, our online coaching program. She's asking about the third shot drop. Here's her question. I always felt that you encouraged the development of this shot in TPS. Again, that's a pickleball system. I put in a lot of work on it because I thought it was a valuable shot to help make my way to the line and slow the tempo of the game down. So can you say more about this? Now, TPS is a online coaching program that includes basically all of the major pieces of pickleball, including the third shot drop is one of the shots covered. And the third shot drop is as Carol points out, it is a valuable shot that helps you make the way to the line and slow the tempo of the game down. That's absolutely true. The question here, the issue here is one of priority, right? What order do you do it in? Third shot drop, important shot. But when should you focus on it? All of our coaching, including inside TPS, is about return side first. We always say, return side is the key. So you really want to have, we call it like a spick and span return side. You want to have your return side locked in. If your return side has holes in it, then the third shot drop is, falls off to the side until you have your return side sorted out. Then you come back to the third shot drop. And this reality bears out when you look at tournament play, high level 3.5 tournament play. And the reason I say high level tournament play is because this is a U.S. Open, these U.S. Open matches, one of the majors, gold medal matches. So 2 best teams left standing to the gold medal at the U.S. Open. That's about as indicative of 3.5 high level 3.5 play as you can find. That analysis bears out the fact that the third shot drop inside a point construction is of nominal use, very like 12% of points in those matches. If you want to see all of the numbers and see the breakdown and also, show examples of how they're scoring, alternatives to scoring that don't include the third shot drop, check out the full video on, Into Pickle on YouTube. It's IN, the number 2, and the word pickle. So Into Pickle on YouTube, and you can check that out. You can also search at Best Pickleball Coach on YouTube because why not have that name? So at Best Pickleball Coach on YouTube works as well. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any other questions or you want to have some conversation about this podcast or any other episode of the podcast, put it down in the comments and we'll do our best to answer those. If you haven't gotten the book, highly recommend it. Consider rating and reviewing the podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps us reach other players who haven't yet had an opportunity to listen to the podcast. And as always, share this podcast with your friends or anybody who you think needs to hear this podcast, this one in particular. So, because if you enjoyed the podcast or if they need to hear the podcast, then sharing it with them makes sense. I wish you well this next week, and I will see you next time on the next episode of Pickleball Therapy. Be well.